Hello and welcome to Buy Africa, the show where we focus on investment opportunities around the continent. I'm Tshepo Modiba, and thanks for joining me. Tonight, I'm joined by the ever dapper Thabo Ncalo, a founding partner at Ankole Capital, for a closer look at Mozambique. Let's talk all good things Mozambique, maybe not just the good things.
Tshepo, good evening, and good evening to all the listeners, viewers. I think Mozambique is exciting. I mean, we've just seen recently where Coca-Cola, and I'm sorry to just jump into the issues, but I have to just jump into the issues. But we've just seen recently where Coca-Cola only last week unveiled a bottling plant, a huge bottling plant, for $130 million. It was one of the only greenfield investments that Coca-Cola has ever made on the African continent for a while. So I think we need to speak about Mozambique from a long-term perspective and from an investment perspective where we're discussing what Mozambique has to offer for the continent. And of course, there are many issues and many problems that are happening in Mozambique at the moment around the $1 billion+ issue, bond issues, and in loans that are being uncovered by the IMF and so forth. But I think overall, if you look at Mozambique, we still have a huge opportunity in the country and what we can develop out of that is the Southeastern African nation. Yeah. Okay.
Let's start with the structure of the economy. What are really the big drivers in terms of that underlying?
So if you look at Mozambique, Mozambique is a huge country that has a very long coastline. Mozambique has a coastline of about 2,500 kilometers. And the bulk of people in Mozambique rely on agriculture. So the bulk of people in Mozambique, if you go to Maputo, and I live in Maputo, and you get a sense of what happens in the economy. That is not the sense of what happens in the rest of the ex-Maputo economy, and that's largely agriculture. So the greatest opportunity that really lies in Mozambique is agriculture. So you look at the structure of Mozambique from a revenue perspective, a third of or at least a third of their economy still relies on donor funding. Means it relies on the IMF and so forth. If you are reporting from many other African countries, that is not the case from South Africa or from other nations. So it's an important perspective. So when you have the foreign nations talking about reducing or cutting down on funding to Mozambique, that is significant because that's a third of it. And the rest of the economy relies on really commodities. So you look at coal out of the dead province. You look at aluminium. If anybody drives into Maputo, they'll know Mozal, and they'll see Mozal as this big aluminium smelter that sits just outside Maputo, coming from Matola. And there's also, of course, gas, which has been a big issue that's been found in Mozambique. So between coal, aluminium, and gas, you've got a huge economy that's very reliant on those commodities, and of course we know what's been happening with those commodity prices.
All right, so I take it, given commodity prices, the look and feel of Mozambique, the economy currently isn't particularly that great.
You know what? It depends. It's not that great, depending on where you're looking at from. I'm saying if you're a long-term investor, I mean, I just mentioned when I started this discussion about Coca-Cola opening and investing $130 million into Mozambique in 2016. And they believe in a long-term picture. And I think people who invest in Mozambique and who should be investing in Mozambique at the moment should be thinking about the long-term idea. So what is the long-term idea of Mozambique? What we need to be doing in a country like Mozambique is quite similar to what we should be doing in Nigeria and many other commodity-reliant countries, is diversification. Because we have people in Africa. The excitement for me in Africa is that we have people, and people can do things that commodities can't necessarily do. So forget about mining coal and aluminium and so forth. I'm not saying forget about it from a strategic perspective, but from a people's perspective, let people do what they can do. And what are people going to do? Food production is essential in Mozambique. And if people invest in agriculture and food production in Mozambique, then you've got some of the biggest opportunities that pop out as a start, excluding real estate, excluding some of the other sectors we can speak about. Okay.
This sounds good. I like the positive the positivity that we have here. In terms of, I guess, from an investor perspective, what's the easiest way of tapping into the long-term investment profile? Is it looking at financial services? Is it looking at the banks?
Yeah. So unfortunately, if you look at Mozambique, I mean, when you look at many other economies across the continent, many others have an active listed market.
Right.
Mozambique has a stock market, but the stock market really is not active by any standard you could put it up on. So there's a standard, and you've got cell phone companies that are listed in Mozambique. So for instance, Mcell has some of its bonds listed on the exchange.
Right.
Mcell is Mozambique's a cell and is one of the biggest providers of cellular technology in Mozambique.
Right.
You also have Vodacom. You also have other providers like Movitel.
Right.
On the banks, you also have quite good investment opportunities in Standard Bank,
right.
in banks like Mozambican and so forth. So you really have to look at Mozambique outside the normal publicly listed markets.
Right.
So Mozambique is really a play where private equity players start to get involved,
right.
Where venture capitalists start to get involved. But the investment universe in Mozambique is quite conducive for a lot of people to come in, because the laws actually allow people to come in and invest quite a lot of money. So I think if people are really interested in investing in Mozambique, of course there's a language barrier. Mozambique is Portuguese,
right.
But it's not so much a language barrier if you can just learn a couple of words and perhaps have a good advisor to just get yourself into the system.
Okay. So policy framework is conducive to foreign direct investment. You're saying Coca-Cola is a great example of that. Right. Are we likely to see more types of deals like that looking to directly tap into this potential?
I mean, if you look at the economy of Mozambique, I mean, you find stores like Massmat,
right?
Massmat through Game, through all the other franchise names as Massmat are in Mozambique. Woolworths is actively trading in Mozambique. Mr. Price from South Africa is actively trading in Mozambique. You have a lot of other Portuguese brands that are trading in Mozambique and other nations. You've got banks, for instance, like UBA and EcoBank that are active in Mozambique. So Mozambique is active from an investment perspective. You've got 18 active banks in Mozambique. But you've got 4 big ones, of course.
Right.
So the space is really, really conducive for people to come in and see if they can place their interest. But you, of course, have to pay and understand the legal system in Mozambique before you come in.
Right. How is the country going to move from the current short-term challenges to realizing this potential? What does it need to do?
I think it's about diversification. It's about the reality we all face as Africans. And I mean as Africans, I mean in African nations where we stand.
Right.
So South Africa faces the same issues. Nigeria faces the same issues where from a Nigeria perspective, as we know, there has to be a policy issue. And Mozambique sits along the same way, because there has to be diversification away from minerals onto other sectors that matter, and that means a more inclusive policy. So we need to see more inclusive policies, and by inclusive policies I mean policies that include people who are subsistence farmers. How do we get them into the economy, as opposed to just talking about big coal projects and so forth? So how do we get people included and involved in running the economy? And I think that's what's going to solve the issue in Mozambique and elsewhere.
And is there a desire to implement those type of policies?
I think there is. I think at the moment the issue with the loans and stuff that are really clouding the decisions in Mozambique at the moment and across the continent, it's an issue that exists throughout. But I think as soon as we can root out the big issues around all these matters around these oil contracts and so forth, and focus on what really matters, and what really matters are people-related economies, fishing, agriculture, consumer-related economies, mining and so forth matter, but they matter through cycles.
Right.
So we have to invest in other sectors, construction. We have to invest in these sectors because they really matter for people, because they employ people and they keep people employed regardless of what happens with the economic cycles.
Right. Okay. I mean, we focused, diversification argument is a very compelling one and a strong one. The sectors that are currently dominant, when gas prices normalize, will Mozambique gas production return to the potential that it showed just a couple of years ago?
So there are 2 players involved. So you've got Eni of Italy and you've got Anadarko, which I guess is American based.
Right.
And those 2 companies are heavily involved in making sure or have been traditionally before all the transactions that have happened, I guess, involved in making sure that the production happens. So soon as we get good gas prices, I think commercially all these projects become viable.
Right.
And they become more viable depending on what happens. But I think we, as people investing in Mozambique, we shouldn't stress too much about relying on commodity prices,
right,
because we've seen the letdown.
Right.
I think Africa has seen the letdown, and the biggest lesson Africa can learn right now in 2016 is, what do we take from the letdown of lower commodity prices? We have to be resilient enough in our economies to learn that we have to be able to withstand whether commodity prices rise or fall. If the commodity prices rise, it's fantastic, it's a windfall, and it has to add on, but it cannot be the sustainer. Whereas in many countries, like in Mozambique, commodity prices have been the sustainer, if you understand the language. So we need to get to a point where the economies can actually withstand internal or external forces through internal bases, and then we'll be able to make it work quite well.
I guess the final concern when you're looking at investing in a particular economy is the currency. Where are we from a currency perspective, and what's the outlook like?
Unfortunately, the Mozambican metical last year collapsed. I think if you look second half of 2015, collapsed over 50%.
Right.
Behind the Zambian kwacha, the Mozambican metical was probably the second worst performing currency. A lot of people don't know this, even before the rand.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of people speak about the rand more prominently than other currencies, but the metical and the Zambian kwacha were some of the hardest hit currencies because of the structure. So you look at where the metical has moved from 30s onto 60s to the dollar, you know, and it's been a huge depreciation, and it's had huge inflationary issues on the economy. So the Mozambican economy at the moment is sitting at, call it 11-12% inflation rates. Because of, and I live in Maputo, I can tell you, I see this. When I go out and I buy a Dogen beer, when I buy prawns on the beach or whatever it is, you see the effect of the prices in what you're buying from the dollar perspective. And sometimes it has absolutely nothing to do with the pricing, but I guess that's inflation, and that's how it's happened to trickle down. But it's a huge issue, and the currency issue are serious. The currency issues are seriously affecting the economy, and I guess we have to just watch against the inflationary issues that go about there.
Thanks to my guest, Thabo Ncalo, founding partner at Ankole Capital. That's all from Buy Africa this week. Remember to follow me on Twitter, that's at Modiba_Tshepo, and send us your thoughts about the show using the hashtag BuyAfrica. For myself and the team,